This video is brought to you by Surfshark. Stick around to hear more about the special offer they are providing to the entire upper echelon community. Jeffrey Epstein is the subject of some of the wildest conspiracy theories ever told. How much is theory versus how much is fact remains hotly contested. But today I want to go down a rabbit hole and examine the possibility that a seemingly innocuous video game, Fortnite in this case, was responsible for exposing a wide-ranging cover-up where Epstein is not dead or buried. He's actually alive and well, living out his days in secret under the protection of multiple governments. Some of what you'll see in this video is fact, some of it is fiction, but all of it is fascinating, requiring the question to be asked, is Jeffrey Epstein even really dead? Let's begin with this. Officially recognized by practically every single notable authority, Jeffrey Epstein was found unresponsive at 6:30 a.m. August 10th of 2019. The Office of the Inspector General report on the 85th page also confirms that the last time Epstein was verifiably seen alive was likely 7:39 p.m. after speaking with his lawyer the day before. The timing matters because correctional officers on duty falsified numerous rounds reports. Instead of checking on the prisoners, they fabricated all of the timesheets, leaving Epstein alone in his cell, unmonitored, from the evening of August 9th well into the morning of August 10th. However, disclosed in the recent batch of files, there's a discrepancy, the first of many such discrepancies, I might add, where on August 9th, a full day before the discovery of Epstein's body, the Southern District of New York Attorney's Office drafted a press release tagged for immediate release, disclosing that Epstein's body had been found unresponsive and later pronounced dead. That press release notably did not contain a specific set of words, which would later appear in a nearly identical document, this time dated August 10th, reading, quote, "pronounced dead shortly thereafter of an apparent suicide," end quote, which, to be clear, are words that were not present in the prior version. These two documents, if accurate, cannot coexist. Pre-drafting a press file for immediate release a day before the subject is even found in his cell isn't possible, unless the document is part of a cover-up. The SDNY would later assert that the press form was merely a typo. The date was wrong, later corrected in a second draft on the same day, August 10th, which may or may not be true, but even with the most charitable mindset possible, the spiderweb of interconnected errors is enormous. This is where I have to ask a question. How many is too many? What number of coincidental discrepancies would it take for even the most diabolical conspiracy to become plausible? Some people say 3 or 5 or 10, others say never. But at the end of the video, after everything is on the table, I want to ask a very simple question. Do you think that Jeffrey Epstein is alive? Somewhat unrelated here, but also super related given the typical subject matter on the channel, a broadband company called Brightspeed recently seems to have suffered a data breach exposing the personal information for upwards of 1 million customers. Emails, phone numbers, billing and service address, stuff like that, which isn't the kind of stuff you want floating around on the public internet, so keeping that sort of data security issue in mind, today's video's sponsor is Surfshark. Surfshark is a VPN, virtual private network, and VPNs have myriad benefits, such as helping prevent certain types of phishing attacks, DNS tunneling, DDoS attacks in particular, or mitigating data tracking and harvesting practices by all sorts of big tech companies. On the entertainment side of things, Surfshark also unlocks additional content on streaming websites by changing your geographic region. It gets around regional censorship, helps protect your IP address with encryption, modification, etc. However, they also have an important new feature. I myself was recently targeted by a pretty sophisticated spear phishing attempt, actually, which I did manage to avoid, but not everyone scrutinizes emails like I do, so if you're interested, Surfshark now offers an email scam checking service with a Chrome and Gmail integration. They operate 4,500 servers in 140 different locations with a third-party verified public report authenticating that they do not keep any logs, and they also maintain what's called a warrant canary, which is a good policy for any VPN to have. If you click the link down below, surfshark.com/echelon, and use the code echelon at checkout, you can get 4 extra months for free with a special pricing offer. Again, a link down below, surfshark.com/echelon, coupon code echelon at checkout for an extra 4 months of the service for free. Big thank you to Surfshark for sponsoring the channel. Back on task. Let's move on to the subject of 4chan. For anyone who doesn't know what that is, 4chan is an image-based online message board where anyone can post anything. It's a sort of deep internet relic of sorts from before the likes of Facebook or Instagram or even Reddit for that matter. It's a website often described by the mainstream media as misogynistic, racist, or homophobic, but reality isn't always so simple. Because of its anonymous nature, 4chan, despite its many flaws, was, and is, often used by whistleblowers or leakers who wish to avoid the consequences of disclosing non-public or privileged information. And when it came to Jeffrey Epstein in 2019, that is precisely what it was used for. Appearing on the /politics board at 8:16 a.m. on Saturday, August 10th, a post was made stating, quote, "Don't ask me how I know, but Epstein died an hour ago from hanging, cardiac arrest. Screen cap this," end quote. August 10th, obviously, is the day that Epstein was discovered in his cell. But the interesting part is that the post went live roughly 40 minutes before any existing media coverage whatsoever. This anonymous user, going by the name RPTND1SI, had posted publicly on 4chan about something that the public did not know, and later went on to expand on that thread, adding privileged and, most importantly, accurate medical information about the case. Quote, "Worked asystole arrest for 40 minutes. ALS intubated in the field /EPI/2 liters NS infused. Telemetry advised bicarb and D50 in field. PT transported to Lower Manhattan ER and worked for 20 minutes and called. Hospital administrator was alerted, preparing statements." End quote. Self-evidently, this person, whoever they were, had insider access of some kind. The things that they knew indicated extremely close proximity to the case, but they're also not alone. Contained in that very same thread, another user chimed in, this time going by the name Swam8W1F, which said, quote, "Not saying anything after this, please do not try to dox me. But last night after 0415 count, they took him medical in a wheelchair, front cuffed, but not one triage nurse says they spoke to him. Next thing we know, a trip van shows up. We do not do releases on the weekends unless a judge orders it. Next thing we know, he's put in a single-man cell and hangs himself. Here's the thing. The trip van did not sign in, and we did not record the plate number, and a guy in a green dress military outfit was in the back of the van according to the tower guy who let him in through the gate. You guys, I am shaking right now, but I think they switched him out." End quote. In a vacuum, this is a random post from an unknown person making wild claims on a 4chan anonymous message board, and that's exactly how it was treated. But flash forward now to the year 2026, contained within the most recent Epstein file batches, and we find this. What you're looking at is a 2019 FBI intake form where a woman, whose name is redacted, called the tip line and made them aware of a social media post, which appeared to be from an MCC guard, the prison where Epstein was being held. She then submitted a screenshot of the 4chan post, and what followed was anything but normal. In the immediate aftermath of Epstein's death, following this tip as well, the FBI issued multiple subpoenas, as seen here, to companies like Apple, AT&T, Citibank, and 4chan, where the subject of those subpoenas were 2 IP addresses, attempting to ascertain the identities of 2 accounts, RPTND1SI and Swam8W1F, as in the same 2 users who had posted on 4chan. Of course, one of those accounts had very obviously been privy to insider information. It's relatively understandable that law enforcement would like to know who they are and why they were posting these things. But the other one should have been nobody. They didn't make threats or post documents. They didn't even have any prior account activity whatsoever. And yet the FBI was now going after their phone records, their bank accounts, their emails, and pretty much anything else they could possibly get their hands on. Now for the coincidence. Contained in that subpoena, from the Citibank records in particular, we find out that the FBI was targeting a man named Roberto Grijalva. And if you then dig into the identity of this Roberto Grijalva, you find a lawsuit from 2023. Bettis versus Grijalva, Southern District of New York. Lieutenant Roberto Grijalva, whose name was originally misspelled in that lawsuit, actually, and had to be corrected, Lieutenant Roberto Grijalva was an officer at the Metropolitan Correctional Facility, MCC, around the exact same time that Jeffrey Epstein was incarcerated there, meaning that if the FBI was correct with their subpoenas, the anonymous leaker on 4chan, claiming to be a prison guard who was blowing the whistle about a suspect van with a possible body switch, was indeed a prison guard at the facility with insider knowledge. Obviously, anyone in the world is capable of lying on the internet, but the layers of coincidence that we're looking at here are rapidly piling higher. How about a relatively fast one? After his death, the contents of the cell that Jeffrey Epstein was held in were obviously collected to be submitted as evidence, and among those possessions was a yellow paper notepad with hand-scribbled notes. Much of those notes are practically unreadable. He had terrible handwriting after all. But if you rotate the document 180 degrees to see what he actually said, you can very clearly make out the words jail out equals 10 on the bottom half. And as we previously established, August 10th is the date that Epstein was discovered, following a possible MCC guard making a post about a secret switch. Keep in mind, this was a random 4chan post at the time that was then aggressively investigated and subpoenaed by the FBI. It's kind of a Hollywood idea, right? Body doubles or switching corpses, so why don't we demystify that concept now? This right here is documented testimony from the unit manager at the Metropolitan Correctional Facility, MCC, which contains a heavily redacted segment towards the end. Quote, upon arriving at the MCC, blank completed tasks before AW blank assigned him to the hospital on Park Row, which is separate from the main MCC building, and where Epstein's body was being guarded. When blank arrived at the hospital with case management coordinator blank, who was responsible for taking Epstein's fingerprints, COs blank and blank were with Epstein's body and had secured the scene. Blank remained with COs blank and blank until personnel from the Office of Chief Medical Examiner, OCME, arrived to transport Epstein to their facility. Due to the large news media presence outside the MCC, a male OCME official called and said he would be arriving at the loading dock with a black vehicle. In order to thwart the media, blank, blank, and blank used boxes and sheets to create what appeared to be a human body, which was put into the white OCME vehicle, which the press followed, allowing the black vehicle to depart unnoticed with Epstein's body. End quote. I have never, in my life, heard of a situation where prison guards thought it necessary to construct a fake body so that they could deceive the media and smuggle the real one out unnoticed. Why do they care? Why does it matter that the media is interested in the first place, if the sum total of the circumstances would be photographs of a body bag? I cannot fathom why this would ever be considered acceptable practice, and when you stick it on top of all the other prior coincidences, I find myself completely mystified, not because of the body double concept, but rather because the handling of Jeffrey Epstein's case, top to bottom, has been unbelievable from the very start. Let's switch gears for a minute now and set the stage for something later. I'm going to refer back to this at some point, so for the sake of continuity, the simple version is that certain accounts belonging to Jeffrey Epstein appear to be still actively in use. The entire Epstein file release process is a botched endeavor. Over redactions, under redactions, victim names made public, perpetrator names being shielded. It's a shit show. But a side effect of that amateur process is disclosure of various account details and, most importantly, passwords. Very quickly after the largest 3.5 million page file dump, Redditors, because of the failed redactions, managed to infiltrate Epstein's Yahoo, Outlook, and Apple ID accounts, among others. But far more interesting than social media or emails is what journalists from an outlet called The Ditch uncovered. It turns out that Jeffrey Epstein had a FedEx account. I didn't even know that existed. And it also seems to be the case that his FedEx account is still active. In summer of 2024, it was being used to send a package to a company called Plan D LLC, which was created by Epstein as a mechanism to own and operate his private jet. The same private jet that was then used personally by Donald Trump in 2024 as well to be a vehicle for his presidential campaign. And this occurred shortly after another package was shipped from the address of Plan D LLC to a separate company called Empire Aviation. It could very well be that the account administrator, a woman named Bella Klein, who was formerly a CPA for Epstein, is the one actively using his personal FedEx account 5 years after his death. But again, the word I simply cannot shake here is coincidence. Now for the pivot to video games. How is it possible that a title, like Fortnite, could have anything to do with the concept of Jeffrey Epstein being secretly alive? Well, for starters, Epstein was apparently a bit of a gamer himself. He had an Xbox account with Microsoft, but that account was permanently suspended following, quote, harassment, threats, and/or abuse of other players, which was severe, repeated, and/or excessive, end quote. He also had a Battle.net account to play World of Warcraft. It appears he also liked War Thunder and had an account there. However, knowing that Epstein's other accounts, like FedEx, have remained active since his death in tandem with the fact that he had an apparent interest in video games generally, we find ourselves, yet again, with a series of coincidental dots to connect. Here goes. Clearly visible in the Epstein Files are these: a series of purchases made on a YouTube account called Littlest Jeff 1. These purchases range from UFC Fight Night packages to historical documentaries and all sorts of other HD programs, but the content isn't actually what we care about. The name is. It turns out that Littlest Jeff 1 is also a Fortnite account, and despite the fact that the account has since been turned private and apparently scrubbed almost immediately from the Internet Archives, a process that is very rarely accomplished with that kind of speed and ferocity. And I also want to make sure to note that during the production of this video, I was watching in real time as the entries in the archive continued to disappear. Even despite that fact, we do still have some screenshots. This is the account activity, and while perhaps not immediately visible, there's another incredible coincidence right here in the screenshot. What this profile tells us is the particular seasons of Fortnite that the account participated in. For those that aren't aware, Fortnite is what's called a live service game, where new content is released periodically in the form of seasons. So with that in mind, we actually have a sort of timeline from this image alone that we can easily measure. Chapter 1, seasons 3, 4, 5, 6, and 10, after which we see Chapter 2, seasons 1 and 5, then Chapter 3, season 3, and Chapter 6, season 1. On the surface, somewhat active in Chapter 1, and then less active as time goes on. Coincidentally, Fortnite Chapter 1, Season 6 ended in December of 2018, while Chapter 10 began in August of 2019. What this means is that the first and most notable gap in the account's playtime history comes during the exact same time frame as the lead-up, arrest, and subsequent incarceration period of Jeffrey Epstein, before he allegedly died. Less than 2 weeks after the start of Chapter 10, his body is supposedly found, after which the Littlest Jeff 1 Fortnite account resumes playing, and continues off and on until this year, 2026. But it gets worse. Epic Games, the developers of Fortnite, almost immediately came out with a response when these claims began circulating online, which reads, quote, "Hey, official Fortnite here. This was a ruse by a Fortnite player. A few days ago, an existing Fortnite account owner changed their username from something totally unrelated to Littlest Jeff 1 following the revelation of Littlest Jeff 1 as a name on YouTube. These Fortnite trackers only display your current name, not any prior changes to it. We have no record of the subject's email addresses referenced in the public document existing in the Epic account system. Since the public document releases, people have created Fortnite accounts with similar looking email addresses and usernames." End quote. That would seem to be the end of it, right? A simple case of impersonation. But it turns out that within Epstein's own email inbox, you can find purchase orders and receipts for V-Bucks, showcasing that while Epic Games may not have had any record of the subject's email addresses that they know of, is very likely, almost guaranteed at this point, that they're missing something. Jeffrey Epstein had a multitude of separate emails that he used for various different purposes. From the official files, we can certainly see a list of some of those accounts, and with that list, we see a description reading, quote, "The email addresses below have been created for or on behalf of Mr. Epstein. However, only jeevacation@gmail.com is actively used by Mr. Epstein himself. jeeitunes@gmail.com is not used by Mr. Epstein, but was created exclusively to provide credentials necessary to open an iTunes account for the purchase of content from Apple. End quote. Elsewhere in the files, we can see handwritten lists and notes that are not indexed by the search function, such as this one containing Jeffrey@mindspring.com, which is not contained in the aforementioned spreadsheet, logically indicating that Epstein had an overwhelming abundance of different email accounts, some of them specialized for individual credentials. We know that Epstein was buying V-Bucks, Fortnite V-Bucks, and we can also infer that he had an as of yet unknown total number of email accounts. Coincidentally, a Fortnite user decides to troll the internet, changing their name to something that they found in the files, but that user just so happens to have a perfectly aligning activity break right at the same time of Epstein's own incarceration. Meanwhile, some of his other accounts, i.e. FedEx, for example, are also actively in use after the original 4chan leaks turned out to be very likely from a legitimate prison guard. At the very same time, the world of disinformation kicked into overdrive alongside all of this, with social media grifters and trolls attempting to muddy the waters, such as this photo right here, which is an AI Gemini image pretending to be a sighting of Epstein in Tel Aviv. Also, the intro to this very video, while certainly fun to make, is also an example of manipulated media. The image at the end, this one right here, was taken from a segment of drone footage. The claim, widely circulated online, is that the anonymous drone video was taken after Epstein's death, but the reality is that the footage was gathered prior, during an official FBI raid. The timestamp was then manipulated by some unknown internet user, leading to an extended lifespan where this image now circulates as purported evidence of Epstein being alive and well. In the end, nothing about the entire situation can ever be taken at face value. But even with an information whirlwind, a barrage of conspiracy theories, and potential evidence larger than any one person could ever handle, I want to once again ask the original question. After hearing everything, the press release, the body fake, the leaks, and other coincidences, what do you think? Is Jeffrey Epstein dead? Is he alive? Is it possible? Impossible? I honestly don't know. But I find myself gravitating towards the idea that there is a non-0% chance that he is, in fact, possibly alive. Maybe not playing Fortnite and trolling people on 4chan, but the possibility that he was switched out and quietly smuggled off to freedom, if he ever really did have the level of blackmail that most people assume, I don't think that's impossible. And after going down the rabbit hole, I thought it made for a damn fine, entertaining YouTube video. That's it. If you want to support the channel, and please do consider doing so if you made it this far, if you want to support the channel, there's links down below, locals and Patreon, channel memberships, monthly subscriptions, the video's sponsor, of course, Surfshark, and more, but I'll cut it there and stop rambling. As always, thank you all for watching, question everything, and have a nice night.